Welcome to Pencils and Lipstick. This is a podcast for indie authors. I'm Kat Caldwell, novelist, short story writer, and book coach. Here on Pencils and Lipstick, we're obsessed with all things story, and it is my goal to bring you the writing tips that you need to make your novel. Hey everybody, welcome back to Pencils and Lipstick. This is the podcast for indie authors. Today, I have an interview for you. So I'll be joined by Joel Pitney, who is the creator and founder of launchmybook.com. I'm Kat Caldwell, the hostess of the show, and this is episode 265. So Launch My Book is an interesting company. I found them for the first time in Future of Publishing Mastermind in New Orleans, where I was a couple weeks ago. I can't believe like a month ago already. Goodness. And what was interesting to me at first, I was like, what can somebody do to help launch a book? So I started talking to Joel, and I'm curious for myself, but I'm also curious for you guys, because I know not everyone's in the same spot on writing and publishing, and not everybody has the same goals, right? Like we all have sort of different goals when it comes to writing, publishing, and this whole book industry. So I talked to Joel, and then he said that he would come on the show and talk to us about how his company works with people. And it's interesting because they can do pretty much everything, from ghostwriting to editing, to getting you all set up with the formatting, book cover, getting you onto KDP and Ingram Spark, and then to marketing. But they don't have to do everything. So that's also kind of the caveat, right? There's a lot of companies that will do everything for you in their certain way. But Launch My Book is actually pretty personalized as they can do it. And you don't have to buy one package and make them do all the things. And, especially if you have a talent at something else. So we are going to talk to Joel in just a second. If you are new to the show, it would be great if you would, subscribe wherever you are listening. This is on audio, but it's also on YouTube. If you want to see my office, if you want to see my guests, you can go to Pencils and Lipstick on YouTube and see us there. If you subscribe to the show, that just helps the algorithm, basically. If you share the show with others, anybody who's a writer, indie writer, and even traditionally published writers, they can get a lot from understanding the industry and the writing process, basically. So we are in April. Everyone's either in spring break or over spring break. I don't know. My kids are in two different spring breaks because they're in two different districts. So last week, one of them had it. This week, the other two have it. Anyway, yay for April. School's almost out. Are you ready for that? I don't know if I'm ready. If you guys want to support the show, you can give a review. That'd be awesome. If you want to support the show monetarily, you can support me over on Substack, where I write every once in a while. Like I publish about the craft. You can also listen to the podcast over there if you really want to. And I publish my short stories and the critiques that I get back. And the critiques are only available to those who subscribe to my Substack and support the Substack. And the Substack is really the place where you can support all my work. The podcast, everything. The podcast does not take on any commercials or anything like that. It just ended up being a lot. I'm the only one that runs this podcast, so it is just me. So if you want to support me, go there, or you can support me by getting my books. Now, you only have a few more days to become an ARC reader for the Victorian historical romance. Across the English Channel. I'm looking at my calendar. So I will be getting the ARC copies to people this Thursday. So the 24th, whatever day you are listening. If you want to be an ARC reader and you're a pretty fast reader, you can, and you're listening to this not on the 21st. I always talk as though everyone's like listening on Monday. You can still sign up. I'm pretty much asking people to get their, have it read and get their reviews ready. I'm obsessed with my hair right now. Just a second. By May, like the week of May 26th. So if that's you, if you can read a book in a month, I mean, I think this is a pretty fast-paced book. Um, Philip has to get married in order to save his house that he inherited when his father passed. And so it's a marriage of convenience. There is disability representation through Carmen, who is visually impaired, and just like they are two different cultures. She's Spanish, he's English, she's Catholic, he's Protestant, and marriage of convenience and all, all the confusion and chaos that ensues from that. But it's pretty fun. I really love Philip, and I really loved writing the story. So if you want more information about that, sign up in the link. It's in the show notes below. And you can get your ebook copy of it, your ARC copy. It will be watermarked, so it's just an ARC copy. But if you do actually read it and review it, because not everyone who signs up does the review, but if you do read it and review it, once I get the print copies, you will be eligible to get one just as a thank you. And pretty soon, Stepping Across the Desert, which if you're on YouTube, you can see that's probably going to get a new cover pretty soon. And then when I get Crossing the Thames out, which will be hopefully out this fall, like late fall, they'll all have new covers, and it will be like a real trilogy. I know. I have a duology, and now I'll have a trilogy with some novellas. So if you are on the ARC team, you will have access to the novella this summer, and then the next book in the fall. And you can quit at any time. It's okay. All right. So that's enough about me and my books coming out. Let's talk to Joel Pitney. Joel Pitney is a ghostwriter and the founder of Launch My Book, a full-service book publishing and promotion company based in Oregon. Let's talk to Joel now. Okay, hello everyone. Welcome back to Pencils and Lipstick. I'm here with Joel Pitney, and he is the founder of Launch My Book. Hi, Joel. How are you doing?
I'm good, Kat. Nice. Thanks for
So,
having
yeah, it was nice to meet you at the Future of Publishing, right? We
me. Yeah. Or
we met
writer
there.
MBA or something like
Yeah, it's so
New
many
Orleans.
names in New Orleans, in New Orleans. So I was drawn to your booth because I was like, like launch my book. Launching your book is one of those things that so many writers don't think about when they're writing their book, right? It's just like
Yeah.
publish, but it's really more about launching it. So I'm curious as to why you started this company. It was way back in 2013, right when the digital age was really taking over. So what were your thoughts when you started Launch My Book?
Well, I wish I had like a really cool origin story, but it was mostly we'd sort of grown organically, kind of
Okay.
with the market, I would say, and kind of with my life. I'm a writer, and so I started off running big kind of New York Times bestseller campaigns for a couple different books that I just happened to get involved in.
Okay.
And I learned the ropes from, I worked with some publicists and marketing companies. And one of the books that did early did well. And the publisher said, "Hey, do you want to do more books like this?" And I'm like, "All right, that sounds good." And I was starting a film company at the time. And so and film companies take a long time to earn.
Okay.
And
Oh,
so I
okay.
needed some side work. And so I became what I called, at the time, I just called myself a book launch specialist. And this publisher and then different authors would just hire me, "Hey, can you help me just do all the things that a person needs to do to launch a book?" And that was different every time. Sometimes,
Okay. So you're like a professional book launcher, but how did you know what to do?
well,
Like,
so yeah, so the no, that's yeah, I know, right? That's an interesting question. So the first book that I did,
yeah.
I was working for a magazine and as a writer, and I was also kind of involved in the marketing. It was a small magazine. It was kind of,
Okay.
and at the time I was young. I was like the young person who did marketing stuff,
They
right?
made you do all the marketing.
Yeah, they're like, "Hey, young guy, you do marketing things." And when the editor in chief had a book launch coming out, we had a publisher and
Okay.
we brought in an actual publicist, but we needed like an on the ground person. And it's interesting. I kind of feel like that was the first time I stepped into this niche
Okay.
that I think we still probably fill and we still help other people to fill, which is, you can bring in all the professionals in the world, but you always need someone at the core to run your campaign, just
Okay.
do all the things that need to be done. And so, um, I learned a lot because we had a publicist on board, we had a publisher, and we also had another marketing company. And I learned from all them, but I had to do all the stuff at the core of it. And so, because that book did well, the publisher said, "Hey, why don't you do the next one?" And so
That's so
that one,
curious that the publisher doesn't have, like, they needed you.
we
That's
were a
really
small,
curious to me. Okay.
well, and they were a small publisher.
Okay.
And a lot of small publishers don't have a lot of marketing.
Okay.
They'll put out a press release and, send an email to their list, but
Into the ether. Like, where does
right.
that even go?
It's like other book professionals usually. It's not
Okay.
readers looking for the next good read usually for small
Right.
business. And
Right.
yeah. And so then the next one made the New York Times bestseller list. And
That'll
then
get your name on the list. Yeah.
yeah, and then I started to get independent
Okay.
queries. But it's very different now. I mean, I kind of, at that point, I started just taking on gigs. And then slowly over time, we became an actual company. My wife was in fundraising. She was worked for a big nonprofit in New York and didn't like it. And so she said, "Hey, how about I come and help you turn this into a company and not just like a solo op?"
Yeah.
That's what we did.
Sounds good. Right.
Yeah. And so
Oh,
yeah, yeah,
that's very cool. Were you were you still writing? And when you say writing, were you doing like your
yeah.
fiction or screenplays, or what were you doing?
Well, at that time I was doing TV and film writing,
Okay.
a bunch of projects in development, one of which we sold to the History Channel, which was kind of cool.
That is cool.
Never got made.
That
Um,
happens a lot, doesn't it? It just seems like,
yeah, yeah,
huh.
they option content. That's what they do because there's so much they need so much content. So they'll just take a flyer on all kinds of things, on all kinds of ideas and then see if they can develop them. And they'll
Oh, that's
invest a
interesting.
little bit of money to try and then, get a pilot and see if it
Okay.
takes and then it doesn't always take.
That's such a weird world. Okay. So you
It
were
is.
doing TV and
Right.
film.
That was my kind of writing passion on the side. And then I was doing all this book launching. And then this was kind of in the early days of, print on demand,
Yep.
self-publishing was starting to happen. And so I had one of my clients ask me to figure out how to do it for him. So I did.
Right.
So a lot of what I was doing is just figuring out stuff for people. Right.
So you're
A
just
lot-
that guy that knows how to figure it out.
That's kind of what it started as. And then
Okay.
we grew into a formal company and over the years. And now, employees and systems and
Sure.
we do all the publishing and promotion. We help people do
Now
the
you got to ask the
Right.
wife if you can do that because she's the COO. Sorry.
Exactly. Well, and she made us successful because she's a systems
Yeah.
person and I'm an intuition. So,
Nice.
you know,
Very nice. So you guys are a good team.
yeah.
So in 2013, that really is kind of the ebook revolution. The Kindle's out at that point. People are slowly changing the publishing industry. Although I feel like back then, so I was getting back into seeing if I could publish something back then, and it was still very much the traditional publishing world, right? Like they
Right.
sort of still had the upper hand. But how did you see that back then, that whole ebook Kindle phenomenon happening?
Well, it's interesting. I never did just ebooks. I
Mm-hmm.
never kind of got into that part of the scene. I was, the first self-published books that I worked on were all print on demand. So
Okay, print. Yeah.
ebook was kind of like secondary. And that was before, I think even before, Amazon KDP at the time didn't even do print. So
No.
we were just using Ingram
Mm-hmm.
Spark, which had, and this was like when Ingram Spark had just started, I think. It used to be
When
just
they were first open to the rest of us and not to like
exactly,
only the publishers. Okay, so
exactly.
this was like what, 2010, when somebody wanted to do, because if people don't know, that was like print on demand. It was a big deal because you basically had to walk your book around to like fairs and like
Oh
in-person
yeah,
stuff. There was one guy, and I wish I could remember his name. I read a whole article on him in the New York Post, New Yorker. Like, which one is that? Where he like sold 1 million, but it was handed out, right? Like one by one. And so of course he never made any list, but he literally just lugged his books around.
yeah.
So what was this idea of print on demand from your clients? Was that what they wanted to do? Was like sell them in person?
No, I mean this was like when I first heard about self-publishing, it was similar to you. I remember I was at the the Book Expo of America, that they
Okay.
have this big conference in New York every year.
Yeah.
And I met Mark Sisson, who he had this big popular blog called Mark's Daily Apple, and he was like a health influencer. And he had started self-publishing. Even he had started in traditional publishing, and he realized, oh, there's more profit if I do it myself.
Right.
And he would just print out. He just had all these books printed, and then he had them in his garage, and then he would fulfill orders. And
Good for
and
him.
Amazon and different distributors would go directly to him and say, hey, I need you to send me 500 more books, and so he would just fulfill them. Um,
That's insane.
I know, and it's interesting because that's some people will still do it that way, but print on demand's really changed the game in that regard.
Yeah.
It's,
Okay.
all
Okay.
you
So
need now is just to upload your files, and there's no warehousing, no fulfillment. The print on demand companies just take care of everything for you.
yeah, you had to be pretty confident back then to like that the book was good, like and formatted correctly, and like
Hmm.
whatever error or typo was not going to be that big a deal. And then you would order like 1,000 copies. It
Yeah,
it couldn't be messed up. Otherwise, you're stuck with like thousands of
totally.
books.
No,
Oh
and
my
yeah, you got to
gosh.
be pretty confident. Exactly. Yeah.
So you figured out how to launch even like that idea because I feel, and correct me if I'm wrong, but having like a publisher and a publicist behind you must be a little bit different than having your book and your just like print on demand launch. Like launching those two books seems different.
Yeah, yeah, no, it does. I mean, the thing you get with a publisher is you get access, you get the possibility of distribution,
Okay.
to brick and mortar, right?
Okay.
You won't always, but because they've got sales reps that are
Mm,
wining and dining the people at Amazon and the people at Barnes and Noble and the people at Books a
yeah.
Million. And back then it was still Borders, right?
Yeah,
Um,
I missed that store.
and I loved Borders, and they would be. That's what they do. They can get bookstores to order large volumes of
Right.
your book, and that traditional publishing gives you that, and
Yeah.
then they give you that stamp of approval, right?
Hmm.
That allows you to get more. You're able to get a lot more media coverage. You're able to get a lot
Right.
more opportunities
Maybe
because
get Reese
people.
Witherspoon to option it. You just have a book.
Exactly. Yeah, no, right, exactly. And publishers do have connections, but the thing is, the
Mhm.
vast majority, even small publishers, they put their eggs into one or two baskets. I mean, they have kind of their
Okay.
top titles that they'll invest more in.
Okay.
They have marketing and publicity teams usually, but um, it's hard to know how much you'll get from them, right?
Oh, okay.
They'll do something, but even big five publishers won't necessarily do a ton to promote a lot of their books. It's
Right.
really
Yeah.
on the author to do.
Yeah. They're really like leaning on their big names, right? To really
Yeah.
make the money with them.
And that's
Okay.
why it's hard to get book deals, right? I mean, especially in nonfiction, right? Where you have to show that you're going to be able to sell a lot of books on your own, using your own platform, your own marketing, in order for them to
Interesting.
even get you a deal, regardless of how good the book is.
Isn't that is that I mean, that's
It is.
funny.
No, it's challenging. It's kind
That
of
is challenging. Okay, so now that we've gone with that news and everyone's feeling like, oh no, more challenging. I
yeah,
mean, the whole writing a book is challenging, right? And then we get to
yeah.
the like publishing. I mean, I feel like, formatting and saying go on KDP is not hard. It's selling the book.
Yep.
I always tell people like for me, I find that the hardest. So you took all your expertise and your wife's expertise and you guys do you mostly work with self-published authors now or is it like
We
50-50?
do.
Okay.
Almost all, yeah. I mean, it slowly
Interesting.
started to shift over time. It was all traditionally published, and then it's all now we're almost exclusively in that side
Okay.
of the business. We do almost exclusive uh, self-published books. I mean, we do a couple traditionally published books.
Okay.
We have two right now that we're running a marketing campaign for. But yeah, it's mostly self-published titles.
So even if you do get your book published through a publisher, if you're not kind of one of their top names, you can
Oh yeah,
come, the writer can come to you and sort of you guys can help them.
right.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, let's get into what you help writers do because it looks like you do a lot. Now you're not a publishing house.
No. No,
Okay.
that's important. And this is, one thing this is my soapbox in the industry. And this is all about just self-publishing. If you've
Okay.
chosen the self-publishing route, you kind of have two options. You can either go with a hybrid company or you could do it yourself. Um,
Okay.
And if you do it yourself, you could literally do it yourself, or you could hire a company to do it for you. But
Okay.
they're different models fundamentally. Hybrid companies have flooded the market. So if you're Googling like company to help me publish or self-publishing company or whatever, you get ads and queries from companies like Newman Springs and Page Publishing, and uh, there's
I used to
literally
be able to list off all of them.
right. Yeah,
Like,
there's
so
so
many,
many of them,
so
and
many.
some of them are associated with traditional publishers.
Hmm.
So like Hay House is a big Mind Body Spirit press, and they have
Hmm.
a hybrid arm called Balboa,
Right.
and that's the pay to play piece. And then and they put a lot of money into marketing, right? I mean, if you go to YouTube, probably if you watch this video and then you go onto YouTube, you'll probably see an ad because
Yeah, yeah, they're listening to us. Yeah.
right. So
Okay, but when you say they put a lot of money into marketing, you're saying they put a lot of money into marketing themselves, not necessarily, not okay,
absolutely. And then
not the
once they
books that
get
they
you, that's
publish.
kind of it. No,
Yes.
and so I don't, there are some really good hybrids too. Like She
Hmm.
Writes Press is amazing. But they're also selective. Most
Yeah.
hybrids are not. And the way that a hybrid works is they're going to publish the book under their account, right?
Hmm.
And so I was just talking to someone that I met at a conference, and she had been approached. She had talked to this hybrid publisher, and they sent her this proposal that made it sound really awesome. And they're like, this sounds great. This sounds great. This sounds great. But if you read the fine print, they take a large percentage of the royalties,
Yeah.
and you have to pay them to publish
Yeah.
the book.
Yeah. I've
And
read a couple of those contracts, and I've
they're
always said
they're
I've
so
never read one that I was like, yeah, do that.
no, it's never clean. And and it was funny. And I was like, oh, this one actually sounds kind of cool. And I finally got to this little piece. I'm like, oh, there it is.
There it is.
So
Yeah.
I believe that if you're going to pay to publish, right, whether that means you're going to pay a freelancer to do your cover, or you're going to
Yep.
hire a company to do the whole enchilada, and that's what we do. You should get all of it, and it should be
Yeah.
published under your own name and your own
Yeah.
accounts, and you should have total control. And
Yeah.
I just don't. There's no value in the hybrids. Maybe there used to be, but they're having a hybrid publisher, insignia on the spine of your book,
Yeah. It doesn't
or
mean
on your
like,
Amazon page. It's not going to get a bump in the eyes of readers or in
mm-mm.
media, and they're not
Yeah,
going to get
maybe 20 years ago.
maybe.
Maybe. Yeah.
Not anymore. And so
Yeah.
I'm just like, look, if you want to self-publish, either do it yourself or hire a company that will do it all
Right.
under your own umbrella.
Yeah. So you basically walk people through what the hybrid publishing company claim like they do. So they will find you a cover, right? They will put it up on KDP, they will format it for you, all that
Yeah.
stuff, but you're
Yeah.
paying them. And when is the ones that I've looked into, I mean, they charge between ten to $40,000.
Yeah.
It's not cheap. Like it's not.
No, no, no,
And
it's
let's
not.
just say like I spend quite a bit on editing plus a book cover. I'm not saying like self-publishing isn't cheap either, depending on what your
Yeah.
economic background is, right? But if somebody goes with your company, everything's under their name, you guys don't take
Yeah.
any royalties after people have paid
You're
you for
out.
your
You
services.
won't see our name anywhere on anything. And
Right,
that
right.
and I actually did after a conference before the one in New I went to the San Francisco Writers Conference, and I met so many people who are trying to figure their way through this. I wrote an article called The Self-Publishing Decision Tree that walks everybody
Yeah,
through, okay, if you want to do this, do this. If you want to do this,
yeah,
and trying to figure out what path makes the most sense.
right.
Because I find that, if someone is a serial author, you're like, all right, I want to do this. I want this to be my side gig, and I want to publish, I want to write series, I just want to keep doing it. You probably want to assemble your own team
Mm, hmm.
of good freelancers, and then find what piece of the process you can do yourself.
Right.
Um, you're going to have to hire for something. If you're not so sure that's your route, you may want to hire a company. Is that
Yeah, yeah.
because if a company is going to be more expensive, right?
Yep.
Because we're going to have overhead, and especially if it's a good one. If they do high quality work, they are going to be expensive. And if you want to publish, 2 books a year, uh, it probably makes sense to kind of. It's almost like you build your own publishing company under your own
Yeah.
umbrella.
Which is not easy. That's just
No.
like, but you have to go through quite a few editors that you don't like or are
Yep.
not good, people who flake on you, people who claim they can do a cover. I'm just saying from my own experience, like
No, I
people who
know.
can do covers that you get back and you're like, that's not okay. I'm not a graphic designer, but my eye can see that this is not fine. And besides all that, depending on, I would even say like your age or your ability to do technology, like you got to learn quite
You
a bit
do.
of stuff.
No, it's not easy.
No,
I mean, you basically have to create, yeah, you have
your
to,
whole publishing company. I mean,
you
you're
do, you
doing it,
really
right?
do. You have to become a publisher and you have
Yeah.
to, and the vetting is, you're right, it's difficult because a lot of professionals misrepresent their work.
Yeah.
Um,
Or you go for
so
the cheap route. You're going to get what
exactly.
you pay for.
You are always, like,
Yes.
you are always going to get what you pay for.
Always.
It
Always. And
is,
it's not always with bad intentions, right? But if you go to Fiverr and you ask somebody for help, it is, like the vetting process is pretty low, right?
right.
It's
You're like,
it's
hey,
pretty low.
I've got $100 budget on my cover design.
They're like, cool, take
You know what your cover is going to look like?
a
It's going to
hundred.
look like, you know, it's going to look like a third grader made it.
Yeah, pretty much, pretty much. I've seen those, and I've had to fire a couple of people
Yeah.
when I've tried. It's just a waste of money. So you guys on your website, you say that you go from writing to publishing to promoting. So what
Yep.
what does that mean? If somebody, let's say somebody listening is like, I have a memoir, I want to write, I have it written, I want to get it out. It might be the one and only book, maybe one other book in my life, but this is kind of like, this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
But I don't want to start my own publishing company. So
Right. Yeah.
what do they get when they come to you with this manuscript?
Well, so we help them through the whole process. We actually do quite a few memoirs. It's kind of interesting. We're doing like 3 or 4 right
Well,
now.
memoirs are hard to sell.
They are. They are.
they
It-
and the
It's
market
very
is
hard to get a
flooded. It's hard
memoir.
to sell any book.
Yeah. No, but you need Memoir Plus to get a publishing deal,
Yes.
is what they say. Um, they. I mean, we do. So we start at the beginning, right?
Okay.
We do similar work to probably what you do. We'll help people with developmental editing if they need it,
Mm-hmm.
and that's usually I usually do that with memoirs. So that's I do like a manuscript review where
Mm-hmm.
I'll read it through and I'll give in-depth notes and feedback.
Yeah.
And then we also do copy editing and
Okay.
proofing. So we do the three layers: developmental, copy editing, and proofing. And then we do all the design things that people need. So we do cover design and interior
Okay.
design. And then we'll set people up for both ebook and print. Um, and then we will establish people's accounts on Ingram Spark and KDP. We do both.
Right.
That
Right.
gets you maximum exposure. And then so that kind of gets you to a book being available everywhere that people buy books online.
Yeah.
And
Now
then
we're there. Now
exactly. And then we do different types of promotion depending
okay.
on the author and the genre. We do all kinds of we do Amazon giveaways, we do virtual book tours. For nonfiction, we run uh, what I call outreach campaigns, which are they're kind of like passion, purpose-driven campaigns,
Okay.
where we're reaching out to influencers and niche media podcasts and websites, and then organizations that are dedicated to the themes of the book. And we're featuring the ideas as much as we are the book. We're not saying, "Hey,
Right.
interview me about my book." We're saying, "Hey, I've got a book on parenting, and I've got this cool story about parenting. Interview me about
Right.
that."
Yeah. So
Um,
you guys see, that's the other part of it too, is when you have a book,
yeah,
when you go to market it and you don't have any background on marketing,
yeah,
I'll once again use myself. I have to go back and learn marketing as I just wanted to be a writer, like that's all
that's
I
what.
wanted to
Yeah, no,
do.
that's it's amazing, right? Yeah,
But to
yeah,
pitch yourself, you actually have to like step back, walk out of the bubble of the book, and pitch yourself in a completely different way. Because if you get a pitch, they probably get a million pitches for I wrote a book, and they
hmm
just delete it, right? They don't, like,
right.
there's probably people pitching them all the time. So the fact that you can help the author sort of see it in a different light, I guess, maybe, or see marketing as
Yeah,
what marketing is and not just like buy my book all the time.
that's the key, and that's why nonfiction's a little easier.
Okay.
Um, in some ways, but the stuff we do for fiction is very targeted towards people who want to hear about books in certain genres. And so
Okay.
though that's but when it comes to the platform building stuff, I think about marketing as like there's two categories. There's platform
Mm-hmm.
building, which is
Mm-hmm.
long game, right? How do your blog, your podcast like this, or what your social media following, if social media is something that you like.
Right.
You have to build that slowly over time. and then you've got promotions, and then you can run, very specific promotions within that platform.
Mm,
And then that's going to look different depending on the genre, right?
okay. So
Platform.
where is the, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Where is the author in this? Like what is expected of them, I guess, when they come to you for the promotion part?
Well, so what we do is one thing I've discovered is that no matter how much money you're spending on marketing campaigns, and no matter how many people that you're hiring, if you're not in it, you're not going to succeed.
Interesting. Okay.
I've worked with people who spent, $100,000 on marketing, and they were just hoping that things would happen because they hired people, and nothing, and books didn't succeed.
Interesting. So
You
so
are going to
readers
have
want to
to,
see you.
yeah. Well, and this is going to sound a little woo-woo, but there's an energy to it,
Okay.
right?
Yeah, I
Like
can
there's
see
an
that.
energy. If you're not willing to put yourself out there, um, people aren't gonna want to read your stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You've got to find a way. Everybody's way of engaging and building a platform is going to be different, but you're going to have to be the captain of your own ship, and you can
Interesting.
hire first mates and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, you're the one who's going to have to run this. That also has a financial correlate to it, right? Because
Okay.
most people don't have infinite budgets to spend on publishing and promotion, right?
Right,
And
right.
so you're going to have to DIY a lot of this and then find the specific things that you need to hire for. And
Mm,
you're going to have to experiment too. There's a lot of experimentation required because each individual method is going to be imperfect, right? But
right.
when you add them up, they start to create something. I call
Okay.
it the Swiss cheese approach, right? Each slice of Swiss cheese has holes in it, but when you stack them, they're solid, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And you have to experiment and see what works for you. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there who say this is the solution to book marketing, and they're basically trying to get you to sign up for their course and pay them,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
We are consumerism society.
no, it's funny, even the conference we went to, I'm getting all these emails now from the organizers of the conference saying, sign up for my solution.
Right.
And I just fair enough. I'm sure that people have found success with their solutions, but at the end of the day, it's up to you. You have to figure out what's going to work for
Yeah.
you. It's not going to be the same,
Well, and like you said, it might be several of those courses or those ideas or those
Mhm.
workbooks or that whatever that you're putting
Right.
together. I mean, you can start social media, and if you hate it, like you said, the energy is
It's not going to work.
shown and it's not going to work. And then you have to
Yeah.
move on to something else. There is a little bit of this like find what works and what grabs where your readers are. Like it really
Yep.
kind of, you might think they're in a place and they're not. They
Yeah.
might be at the local library and that's where
Right.
you're going to have to go. So you're saying that when a writer comes to you, they're pretty much, you bring them in and they're part of the promotions.
Yeah, and we figure it out. Everybody's different. You don't just sign up for a package.
Nice.
Um, we can do that. We have a package of services, but what I often do, some people will come to us just for marketing. Some
Mm-hmm.
people will come to us for the whole enchilada. Some people will come
Mm-hmm.
and they're like, "Hey, we actually republish a lot of books because
Okay.
they've signed with hybrids that they hate, and so we just republish the book."
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we'll kind of build a custom campaign based on what we think they should do.
Oh, that's
Um,
nice.
and then also, I often will tell people things that they should just do on their own and not pay us for.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
and it's often the platform building stuff. Um, we're actually my colleague Sadie, who she kind of runs our operations. It's my wife Laura and Sadie and I. We run the company. She and I were just talking about how we have a lot of clients where they come in and in the publishing process, right? And that takes 6 to 7 months when someone
Mm-hmm.
comes to us and they want to do editing. And historically, we haven't really done much to help them do marketing during that period.
Okay.
We're just focusing on production, and we realize that's a hole in our business
Mm,
because that's a really important time for people. And so
right.
we've started to we've started to do add sort of like a platform building phase. So while
Yeah.
we're finishing your book, here are all the things you should be doing, right?
Right.
And we kind of consult with everybody and we figure out, okay, well, not everybody's going to want to be on TikTok, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not everyone's going to want to do video. Not some,
Right.
some people just want to write stuff. So we'll figure out, okay, well, what is the platform that you can create that makes sense for you now and start investing in it with your time between now and launch to start building some momentum, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That must be nice because you can find checklists all over Google, but to have somebody like sit down with you and be like, listen, here's your wheelhouse. Maybe
Yes,
you should do this.
right.
And that just like a little bit of back and forth because there's so much, we spend so much time alone as writers. Like half the time
Yeah.
we're like, I don't know, what should I
No,
do?
you
But
don't know, right? Well, and it's funny you say that. I know people have these checklists because they come to me all the time and they'll list me they're like, can you do this checklist, this checklist item? And I'm always like, hold on a second. Let's just scrap the checklist. Let's talk about you and your book and
right.
figure out what you actually need.
Yeah.
People will be like, oh, can you do a Goodreads, giveaway? And can you do a pre-order campaign? And can you run my launch team? I'm like, who's telling you this stuff and why are you doing it? Because I want to know
Yeah.
those things might be good for you, but oftentimes they're not. They're not relevant.
Oftentimes it is just a company doing company things. They got to make money,
Yeah.
and sometimes Goodreads works or those promotions work. And again, some of it you're just going to have to try and see if your readers are there and if they're not there. But sometimes they don't work and it's $200 down the drain. And
Yeah. No, it's
it is what it
totally
is.
true. Yeah.
Like,
And then sometimes things hit.
yep. And
I
sometimes
talked
things hit like 5 years later. You have no idea why.
exactly. I talked to someone the other day. I'm going to interview her for my YouTube channel. And she's become a pretty successful self-published author. And she said luck actually plays a big role, she thinks.
Yeah, I think so.
She got lucky. She said one of her books just for some reason hit at a certain time
Hmm.
and the niche that she was in got really popular and she soared up the Amazon rankings and all of a sudden people started buying her books and that launched her to a whole new level. And
Yeah,
she said it was
yeah.
total luck.
And if you know your story, if you, like you have your storytelling skills down at that point,
Yeah.
you're really, really lucky and you're like off and running.
Yeah.
Sometimes it hits and your storytelling skills are not where they should be. And then you hit and then you flop. And that's hard to deal with. I've dealt with
Yeah.
some authors like that because you feel like you're a success and then you go down, or you don't know. Like sometimes the niche will go away, like
Yeah.
vampires, or like,
Yeah.
and then have to come back and relearn. Like this is a very strange industry, right? Like
It
it's
is. Yeah.
and sometimes being a unicorn's great, and sometimes it's like if you don't actually know what you did, you can still keep like throwing spaghetti at the wall. Right?
Yeah.
Like, so hopefully she's very analytical. I know a lot of authors are like, I don't know, just
Right.
happened. Right?
Yeah.
But
I
we
know. I mean,
also have to remember that when we're listening to people be successful, and some of them have built like a business off of it, do they actually know how they got there? Or was it just all, like you said, all their Swiss cheese slices put together
right.
and it
Well, you
just,
don't hear all the failures and the experimentation that they did to get there
or all the money they
and,
spent? Yeah.
and all the money they spent. And then they came up with a very specific formula that worked for them.
Right.
So I'm always wary of that.
Yeah.
I always when I'm looking anyone who's talking about any aspect of book publishing and promotion, the people that I tend to resonate with or gravitate towards are the ones who are giving you more broad advice that you apply to
Hmm.
yourself, as
Yes.
opposed to
Yes.
do my formula. And there's almost always an ask coming on the back end of that.
Yes. It usually has to do with your credit card. Yeah.
Yep.
And again, like none of this is bad necessarily, but I think you hit it on the head of like it's all about really you, the author. You have to be part of it.
Yep.
And there is just a part of like figuring out what works for you, what works for your niche and your book. And then what is your long-term plan, right? Because so when we talk about launching a book, I think a lot of people think of it as like that day that it gets published or maybe a week after. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's
Like,
funny. It's so funny that I'm like I have a company called Launch My Book, but I don't put a lot of emphasis on launch in the traditional sense
mm-hmm,
because the whole thing is a long game. And so
yeah,
when I think of launching a book, I've I think of it as more launching it from idea to print and
yeah,
getting it, and it's a long game, right? And I think people get caught up in that first week, first day, pre-order campaign, all that kind of stuff, and all that's fine, and I'm fine with people doing that, but the problem is that a lot of people will do that at the expense of the long game stuff,
Yeah, I
right?
agree. Hmm.
They'll get overly fixated on these little gimmicks and they won't do the longer sustainable things that you need to do to build something slowly over time. And
Yeah.
they'll just kind of do this little flash in the pan piece. So I'm
Yes.
always like, if you're going to do launch type things, make sure that it's like you want to have fertile soil,
Hmm.
right? And if you're going to, so your little launches are your little seeds that you plant, but you have to make sure that they're being planted in fertile soil. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can't, you know,
Yeah.
sorry,
And be
partner, I
be
like
like
metaphors.
be careful about who you're watching do that, because the majority of the people I know who do well on just focusing on that launch, that pre-order launch, first or second week, they're the people that are getting like 10 to 12 books out a year. Like
Yeah,
they are the like fast moving authors, whether they have a team, I mean, James Patterson, how many books can that man come out with, him and his
I
team,
know.
every year? But
Yeah,
that's their strategy. Most of us are not at that point, right? And so we have
yeah,
to be careful who we're comparing ourselves to, because
exactly.
most of us are going to, even if you have more books than you, it's, what is it, a year, 2 years,
Right.
like, and a book is not like a hamburger. Like, anyone can buy a book and learn from it and use it and read it 2 years later, like
Right.
10 years later, like Jane Austen, so
Yeah.
yeah, I do think the industry puts a lot of emphasis on that, sort of whether you had a good launch or a bad launch. I always ask people, like, what does that even mean to you? Like a good
Right.
launch, you know,
Right.
you got so much work done. Your book is out there. Like,
Yeah.
let's celebrate, right? Let's have a good time. And yeah, you're gonna have to be selling that book for a while now. Like,
Yeah.
yay.
For a long time. Yeah.
So how do people come in contact with you if they're listening and they're like, oh, that sounds like a lot of stuff? Maybe I can get launch my book to help me out, wherever it is in the process. And I think it's cool that you don't have to do like the whole process with you. It kind of depends on where they are, right? So what
That's
is,
really important to us. Yeah.
yeah, because
I don't like to force people into something they don't need or have people pay for this package where you only need
yeah,
80% of it and 20% of it is fluff. We're just like, nope,
right.
we'll do all the things. And if you're like, no, I'm going to do that myself, I'm happy with that. So
Okay, okay. Yeah, a lot of the hybrid contracts I have read over the years include a really big poster of your book cover. Always
I
like,
know.
guys, that is fluff. Like, you
And
can
a
go down
press
to
release.
Staples. Yes,
Yeah.
in a press release.
And then distribution, they'll say, and this is the thing that drives me crazy. They promise you distribution, but all that means is that you're in the Ingram catalog,
Yeah.
which you can get on your own. And
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that anyone's gonna
For like $20,
distribute
you can
your
get it.
book. You're just in the catalog,
Yes.
which is a database.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. A lot of people don't understand that, right? So it's just good to have, like, information is king, right? Just to be informed about what it is. And then, like you said, if people have a talent or a certain thing that they enjoy doing,
hmm
they can take that off your list. So how do they get in contact with you guys? How does that process sort of start when you first start
Yeah.
out?
I mean, our website, launchmybook.com is a good place to check us out. We the way it usually works is someone either is referred to us or they find us through social media or just a Google search, and we have a conversation.
Okay.
It's me. We talk, and I find out about, hey, what's your book? Where are you at in the process? What are the things you need? And then I try to let people know how we could potentially help them.
Okay. Okay.
And we sometimes we can't. Sometimes people want something that we can't offer, or I will off. I really like honesty. I'm not a. I could probably double my sales if I wasn't super honest.
Yeah.
I like to let everyone know what the real value is and what they can
Right.
expect to get
Right.
back. And
Right.
so I really, because we all want to enjoy our work. We don't want people to have expectations that aren't realistic when they're working with us because we want them
Yeah.
to be thrilled when that book finally comes out. So
Yeah.
everything's a conversation with us. We do conversations and then we figure out, okay, well, these are the services that we could offer you. Uh,
Interesting. So it really is individualized to each project.
yeah, I mean, we have systems and processes, right?
Oh, of course. You have
We've got
contacts,
it.
you have lots of
Yeah,
things.
we've got it.
Yeah.
We've got all that kind of stuff, but I really do like to be tailored as much as we can.
Hmm.
People will come to us and, maybe they have some graphic design skills. And I've, I usually people don't do a good job designing their own cover, but every once in a while they do. And so
Yeah,
someone will
sure.
send me their cover and I'll be honest. I'll be like, yeah, that's good. You don't need to hire us. You're fine. And sometimes I'll be like, dude, you gotta,
Yes.
You need to redo this cover, whether it's us or someone else, you know.
But that's so good. Like the problem with this industry,
Yeah.
it's a little bit different than music. Like they can put whatever they want,
Hmm.
on their music album, and that's
Hmm.
not really selling the album. Like your cover is
It's
selling
everything.
your book. It is everything. If it looks DIY'd, I don't know. I mean, we're not
No
supposed to
one
judge
will
a
take
book,
you
but we
seriously.
do. Yeah,
No,
it just
you don't. That applies to personal development, right? Don't judge a book
mhm.
by its cover. It applies to humans. It's a great metaphor,
Yeah,
but
but
to
it's
books, it's completely not
it's
true.
completely not true.
And I personally think that's good because to
Yeah.
me, if someone usually a good cover reflects the fact that that person cares about their book.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I know I don't mean to be offensive, but I think that if you're willing to put a quote unquote half-ass cover on your
Hmm.
book, it makes me feel like maybe you did the same thing with your book. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yep.
As a potential reader, that's how I see it. I could be wrong, and it's not always the case, but that's what you put out to the world. So,
Yes. Yes, that is where our thoughts go. And as two people who have been in the book industry, you've been a little bit longer. I don't know about you, but I've seen books where you go, okay,
mhm.
I was right. Like, there aren't
Yeah,
even any paragraph indents in this
no,
book.
it's true.
Yeah, we've seen it all. Like,
Yeah,
where are your dialogue tags? Why is this just one long paragraph? I don't understand. So it is just one of those things, and part of being an independently published author is you are kind of putting that investment in first, right?
mhm.
Like a book cover is going to cost you a couple hundred, a good one, but not thousands, right? Living a couple hundred, and editing will cost a couple thousand, and it just it is what it is. But if you want a really wonderful product, I always tell people this: you have to have the product that you're really proud to promote, because if you don't promote
Exactly.
it, then no one will buy it, and if you're not proud of it, people will feel that, right?
Yeah, you've
And they
got
won't trust it.
when you see that book, you need to be full of warm emotions and joy.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have to feel that. That's really important.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So we are going to have the links in the show notes below. I see on
Yeah,
your website right now, it's a big red button. You can contact us for free
yeah,
consultation. So you guys can
yeah.
just click on over there and you can talk directly to Joel. He's very nice. He will tell you all about your book. I mean, it sounds like you guys have a lot of experience, which is wonderful. And honestly, just with promotion, if you guys have contacts, that's already you'd be starting out on a higher level than most people when they're just like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Hmm.
Somebody buy my book, right?
Yeah,
So it was so wonderful to have you come on and talk to
yeah,
talk to
yeah.
us
Thank you.
about my book.
Yeah, thank you for having me.